Thank you. Once again, my name is Ann Murphy. I'm the lobby team chair for the League of Women Voters of Washington, and I'm here with several of my lobby team colleagues, and we're here to share with you ways to be involved at the state level to make change in public policy through legislative action. Those of you that joined us yesterday heard quite a bit from Selena and Jessica in terms of action at the national level. It's all very similar here at our level. In the state level, we're working on our state issues and addressing those. So we're going to take it to the state today. And to get started, I invite you to grab a piece of paper or something to jot down a to-do list as we go through the session in case you hear something that you want to think about doing or have a question about. So just jot down a note. We'll revisit that as we get to the end of our session. And then here is our session, our jam-packed agenda of lots of things to get involved in state level action that we'll discuss in the next hour. And we'll move to Q&A as we have finished the agenda, either if we get done early or if we wind up going late, we'll get that Q&A in before 5:30. So to get us started for our very first agenda item, before I take a look at the rest of the agenda, we have a poll for you to take because we think it'll help us to get a sense of the level of action you all are involved in. So Cynthia has started the poll for us. Please indicate the level of involvement you have had with LWVWA action during the last 2020 legislative session. And so go ahead and mark one of those all the way from what is, I don't receive the legislative newsletter, what is it, all the way up to I'm doing everything but want to be more involved. So click on one of those items and we'll give you a chance to do that and then start taking a look at the rest of the agenda. Oh, thank you for those votes coming in, and
they're still coming in. Yeah.
I see that. I see that. And just remember, be honest. We there's no we don't know where you're landing in this poll, and so appreciate knowing where people are.
Remember to click the submit button.
It looks to me like everybody's voted. 75% of the participants have voted, and let's give it 5 more seconds.
Oh, that's right. Some of us who are hosts can't.
Okay, here we go. In polling and share results.
Well, okay, great. It looks like we have a pretty good group here. That our highest reporting in was our 28% of our folks do the action alerts and then click through to one or more of the issue pages that are also listed in the legislative newsletter. And thank you to those of you as well who do action alerts up to 60% of the time. So we're going to look at some more things that you can do, and hopefully as we go through this, then you can up yourself to another level. We will address places where you can make sure you're getting the legislative newsletter. Sometimes it's all a matter of getting it figured out in your spam filter. So that's something we will be addressing. So, okay, Cynthia, could we stop sharing the poll? And if it doesn't go away, just click the X and it'll go away for you. So, as we go through our session today, you will have a chance to meet our contract lobbyists, Nancy Sapiro and Pam Crone. We'll look at obstacles to involvement that some of you may think you have. We'll look at the 2020 action lobby team accomplishments. We'll look at some aspects of how the lobby team works, and then how you can become more involved in state action. And then there's even more that you can do. So, and then we'll go to our Q&A. So let's go to the next slide, please, Cynthia. And we are so indeed fortunate to have 2 fabulous contract lobbyists who assist our volunteer lobby team so that we can navigate the halls of the governmental process in Olympia. I've asked Nancy and Pam to speak to these topics. Why should you as individuals bother doing league advocacy? And to talk about the power of numbers and why league member role is so important. And in this uncertain time, I've also asked them to look into their crystal ball at the legislative future. Will there be a special session this year? And what can we expect in the coming year? I invite you to type questions into the chat box as well for Nancy and Pam. We're going to get to spend about 10 minutes with them here while they talk, and then we answer questions. And so now I present Nancy Sapiro and Pam Crone, and we'll leave the PowerPoint and bring them up on screen. So we've got Pam first, or is
I can't find Nancy.
I'm back. Can you see me?
Not yet.
which of you wanted to go first?
I did.
Okay, and can we stop the screen share, please?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Nancy, take it away.
So
Oh.
where are
Sorry
they?
about that. Of course, at the moment we're about to go on, I had an unstable internet connection. Hi, everyone. I am Nancy Sapiro, one of your contract lobbyists, and Pam Crone will be speaking in a few moments. I just wanted to take a moment, if I could. I'm sure all of you, like me, are reeling from the events of the last few weeks and the grief and the anger about the murders of George Floyd, others at the hands of police. There's so much going on between the protests, the political discourse, the confrontations, and on top of all that, the pandemic. We really are in an unparalleled moment in time. Anne asked us to briefly talk about advocacy and to offer some insights into what the legislature may be doing in the coming months on the heels of the various crises that we're dealing with. And I have to be honest that I find that to be a challenging ask because it feels like business as usual isn't possible right now, and the future seems particularly unknowable. What the past few weeks I think have shown us is that nothing is going to change unless we demand it and we advocate for it. And whether you find yourself protesting in the streets, writing letters to Twitter, calling your legislators, all of that advocacy, and it is the only way that we are going to create change in our country. There certainly is important work that needs to be done at the state level. I think former President Obama the other day mentioned that a lot of the critical work that needs to be done is at the state and local level. And as a democracy organization that promotes civic engagement and that works for voting rights as well as many other important issues, there's so much the league can do and has been doing for a few years. I think at this moment, that's really all I'm going to say about just advocacy. We're happy to take questions if you have specific questions, but I'm really not sure what to say at this moment. It just feels like such an unbelievable time in our history. So I'm just going to leave it there if that's okay. As you may or may not know, Pam and I serve as contract lobbyists for the league, and what that very closely, and we provide political context to them and strategic advice to them as they do their work on the ground. Pam and I are in Olympia every day, and so all day. And so we're able to provide insights to things outside of particular lobby teams' issue areas or information that they might not otherwise have that helps them do the really important work that they're doing. So as far as a crystal ball and sort of what we see coming in the next few months leading up to the 2021 legislative session, I think it's important to just take a moment to look back at where we were. And January 2020 was only a few months ago, and yet it feels like a lifetime ago. But we began that 2-month, 60-day session where the economy was just going gangbusters. There was a real focus within the legislature about focusing on housing and homelessness. We had more than $600 in additional reserves. They were looking good. 6 years later, we were in the midst of which had taken hold of not only and caused havoc and created and threatened our public health, but also our state economic stability, as well as our state revenues. As a result of that, when it came time to be signing bills and signing the budget, our governor exercised his line item veto, and he vetoed in total about $450 million worth of spending, both for the current funding and for the upcoming vetoed a number of really important policy proposals that had fiscal implications because it was his belief that it was just not the time to be making additional new spending, and we could see sort of the economic crisis that was looming for us. Pam, I think I'm going to turn it to you to talk a little bit about what we have an official revenue forecast coming out in a couple of weeks and what we can anticipate that revenue forecast looking like, and share the latest gossip of what we know about special sessions or not and what we can anticipate seeing in the coming months.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, I'll start with that. The revenue forecast is coming out June 17th. We have an idea already of what that revenue forecast is going to look like. There have been preliminary indications that there will be a huge budget deficit. We're talking about a little over $7 billion over the next 3 years. In light of that, the Office of Financial Management has sent a letter to all of the state agencies asking them to go through an exercise where they identify savings in their particular agencies. And the savings are to come during the period of the 21 fiscal year. So 2020 fiscal year ends June 30th. The new fiscal year 2021 begins July 1st. So the agencies have been asked to come up with $1.9 billion worth of proposed savings during that fiscal year. That amounts to about 15% per agency. Each agency was given a target number, and those proposed cuts had to be delivered to the Office of Financial Management by June 1st. We have an indication from some of the agencies what those proposed savings might look like. We don't have them from all agencies. So the question is whether the legislature will convene in a special session. It is the governor that calls the legislature in. The purpose of that special session would be to make some of those cuts legislatively. Advocacy groups do not really want to see the legislature come in and make cuts only. We have been through a bad fiscal time during the Great Recession, and we are still seeing the damage done by cuts then. So the $50,000 question has been, will there be a special session? Will there not be a special session? When will that special session be? It depends on the given day and the hour, the response that you will hear. It does appear as of this time now that there likely will not be a special session in June. Now, that can all change tomorrow, so don't hold me to it. There could still be a special session. It's likely to be later in the fall. And then you might ask, well, what will that special session look like? Will the legislators come to Olympia? Or will there be some other kind of convening? Voting by proxy, convening remotely somehow. We are still in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is unlikely that if the legislature were to convene, they would convene publicly, or all of them actually come to Olympia. That's where we are right now in terms of there being a special election, or excuse me, special election, a special session. I conflated that with election because we do have an election in November. In terms of the legislature, all 98 seats of the House are up for grabs, and about half of the Senate seats. It would be very challenging to have a special session before that election. And from the legislators' perspective, in terms of their trying to campaign again during and in a way that they've never had to campaign before. The best way to share your values is to be able to go door to door and to talk to voters. That really isn't possible right now. So I think I took it back to Nancy to close things out, and we'd be happy to answer more specific questions if you have them. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, and we'll see with Nancy, she's got some unstable internet going on, so, and we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So Nancy?
Okay, you went out for a minute, Anne. Can you repeat your question?
Oh, no, I was just saying we do have a couple of questions, and I was making note that you are still having internet instability there. One of the things I guess we all need to deal with legislatively, right?
Yeah, I really don't have anything else to add. I do see that there are a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want us to hold on those, or? Okay. I'll start, and then Pam, please feel free to jump in. As far as for de-escalation training, and if whether or not any of that is being proposed, I don't know the answer to that. As Pam said, every agency was charged.
Nancy, maybe we can go back to Pam because this is getting significant.
Can I make a suggestion, Nancy? If you turn off your camera, often if you're not taking up net space with your camera, your audio will be better.
So the question for those that can't read it was, does the state have money for RCW 43-101-455, the police de-escalation training in the proposed cut? How much?
I can't answer that question, but it's a really good question. If there's anyone among us who can answer that, then perhaps they can do so. We, at this point, do not know what is subject to or potential cuts from each of the agencies. I know we had some very active members working on the initiative and then the statute around training, so somebody may be able to speak to that.
Has the list just not been published, Pam?
I'm sorry?
Pam, has the list just not been made public yet?
No. Department of Health is the only agency that has provided kind of an informal email to constituents about what might be on their list. No other agency has done that yet.
Okay, and let's go, there's another related question here. What legislation is there at the state level that could keep persons of color safe from police brutality without any consequence to police? Is there anything, are you seeing anything come up on that?
I'm not seeing anything. I mean, there is a ton of concern. Nancy and I have done some calls with legislators, and I'm sure that, and I'm confident that there will be some legislation at some point. I don't know what that will look like, and I really don't have a crystal ball as to whether.
I know that was a big ask. So, but and then the one question here related to nationwide vote by mail. That's a national question, and of course we vote by mail in this state already. And I would will refer people to the information we got from our national folks last night. One more question. Or there are a couple here related. Why is it, it's like we always talk about cuts. Do they ever look for new revenue?
There will be a big push for revenue. That work has started. There are legislators who will be interested in doing that. And I believe that a coalition is forming around pushing for revenue. I will tell you what I've heard to date, and that is that progressive revenue, if it's to happen, would probably not happen until 2021. And if there are legislators who are pushing for revenue along with the cuts, those revenue sources would probably be regressive. Now that would be revenue that might be raised at a special session.
Okay, well, we think we have one more question here that I think we get answered separately because it does deal, it's elections proceeding, and Nancy and Pam are our experts in dealing with our legislative piece, and that looks like a question for our Secretary of State. So thank you so much to Nancy and Pam. Nancy, we're sorry you had some connectivity, and Judy's waving her hand at me.
Well, just because I had a question directed to me, like you had asked in the beginning.
Yeah,
So I don't think you saw it on the question to everybody. The question was, if a legislator whose party is in the minority in the legislature at any given time says they have no clout to move on an issue you care about, what would you suggest we say to get them to help on the issue?
All right, I'm gonna give Nancy a chance to answer it if she can at least speak.
Yeah, I'm here if you can hear me.
Okay, because I've been talking a lot. So Nancy, do you want to give a shot?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things you can do. One, you can, you yourself, see if you can find some legislator within the majority party that also care about the issue. And then potentially the two of them could collaborate. To the extent something becomes a bipartisan issue, it has a greater likelihood of being successful. If you don't have those connections or relationships, you may be able to at least try to identify who some of those people might be in the other party, and suggest to the legislator you are working with in the minority party, like, here are some people you may want to reach out to see if this issue resonates with them. So that would be a place that I would start.
Okay, we are way over time with you all. I'll invite you all to make sure you're at action workshops, such as what we will have, to talk more about some of these things. And we will capture the questions that are in the chat box and get written answers and get them back. And so thank you to Nancy and Pam for that look at league advocacy in the legislature. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Kathy Sakahara, a former LWVWA Action Chair, to highlight and discuss obstacles you may think you have by being part of league advocacy. So Kathy?
Thanks, Ann, and thank you to all of you who are joining us today. I think last count it was 82. That is exciting. I'm also really excited about the 13 people, I don't know, was it 13 people or 13% who said that they'd like to get even more involved in advocacy. And I suspect there are more than 13% who feel that way. You obviously you're interested because you came here today. So we want you to know, we'd like to have you more involved. So we're curious, what's stopping you? So I'm going to ask you to open the chat box and direct your comments either to everyone, or if you're shy about them, if you want to direct them just to me, Kathy Sakahara, that's fine. So start telling us what has stopped you from getting more involved. Why aren't you a lobby team issue chair, or at least working with an issue chair? Maybe you think your contribution isn't needed or welcome. I can tell you that's not true. So just start putting in some of your obstacles, and we'll respond to those later. So as you're putting in those obstacles, I'm going to go toss it back to Ann, who's going to talk about our recent successes.
Right, and so now we need the slides back up, please, Cynthia, because while you're thinking about some of those obstacles, I do want to share some of the things we've been doing, some of the accomplishments of the lobby team in the 2020 legislative session. And let's see, we're waiting for the slides.
I'm trying to get it and it's not cooperating.
Here we go.
One more.
Okay, next slide. Okay, and there are 3 slides here. We're not going to attempt to read all of these things because you can, you have a copy of this PowerPoint. You can click on those links. Those are live links in each of those places. And so we had accomplishments. We had a list, and this is only a part of them. We had a total of 70 bills that our people worked on that were passed and signed. So just, we'll take a look first. We had bills in our Making Democracy Work category, fighting climate change in its effects. The next slide shows you many of the social justice bills that we were working on, and inevitably there will be more coming up. And then on the 3rd slide, more social justice, and then obviously working with establishing fair revenue. Key will be settling the I-976 court case, and then accounting for the COVID related expenses. And so after looking at these, I think I've seen a number of items come up in the chat box. So I'm going to turn it back to Kathy, and we can stop sharing the slides at this point. And Kathy will respond. We've got just a few minutes to respond to those things that have come in.
Thanks. So not surprisingly, the first thing that was mentioned, and many of you mentioned the issue of time. I totally get it. I'm very privileged. I get to work on league advocacy full time. Most people can't, and we understand that. So a couple things I want to point out. One is in terms of, we've worked really hard, and Martin will talk later about our action alerts. We've worked really hard so that in 3 or 4 minutes on a Sunday morning, you can communicate with your legislators about the most pressing issues, in our opinion, of the week. So we want to make that easy. So the idea of becoming an advocate for the league can feel sort of overwhelming, and some people said, well, I don't have time to learn it all. So ask yourself, how much time do you have? Do you have 10 minutes a week? Maybe during the legislative session, which is basically two to 3 months, depending on the year, do you have an hour a week? Don't think of it as another job that's going to be is going to land on your lap every single day, but can you just tell us, hey, I will give you 15 hours a week. We'll be able to use that. I'm sorry, what?
Did you say 15 hours a week?
Yeah, I slipped that in. No, that was probably a Freudian slip, but no, I meant 15 minutes. And the other thing, and that's a number of people said, well, I don't feel like I know enough. I don't know enough to talk to my legislator. I don't have time to be an expert. Well, I will tell you, if you don't know enough, getting involved with an issue chair is a great way to learn. We are not going to, if someone says, hey, I want to get involved in, say, campaign finance reform, I'm not going to give you a quiz. I'm not going to ask you how much, well, I might ask you how much you know just to sort of figure out how we work together, but that's how you learn it. Say, I'd be willing to read emails from 3 national organizations that deal with campaign finance. I will read them and I will highlight for you important things. That's a way for you to get deep dive learning very quickly and also be a terrific service to us. And another person said, I don't know enough to talk to my legislator. Yes, you do. Whatever you know, you do, because you don't have to be an expert to talk to your own legislator. You need to say, I live in your district, I vote, and this is what I think, this is what I feel. And with very rare exceptions, legislators are not going to put you on the spot and start quizzing you. They just want to know what you think. Another person mentioned that they do a lot of work for other groups, and I think is a great way to really maximize your time and coordinate that work with the league. So for instance, if you're active in, well, gun safety group is a very common one for league members. You can take that work that you're doing and also coordinate with Pat Griffith, I'm not sure if she's with us today, who is our issue chair on gun safety. So if you write a letter to the editor, or you read a great letter from your other group, you might say, hey, Pat, how about if I take this letter and I modify it, and either I can submit it or you can submit it on behalf of the league. So you can do research for us that's not really adding more time to the work you're doing. It simply lets you leverage your time. And another person said, well, I'm not good enough with technology. Again, it is something that can be learned. Anne gives me a hard time. I always say it's easy. Well, it's not easy for everyone, and I get that. But something like tracking a bill or seeing what's going on in a committee hearing or watching a committee hearing, if you don't know how to do it, it is something that we can certainly walk you through. And the other thing is, frankly, one of the things we often need is pretty low-tech work. Sometimes we need what I have to honestly describe as clerical work. Take this list and reformat it in a different way or something. It's, it may not feel glamorous, but it's a way to make a great contribution.
Hey, Kathy, I'm seeing one thing that I think really needs to get addressed. I live in Eastern Washington. I can't go to Olympia. I don't want to go from Seattle to Olympia. I don't, talk about not having to be.
Thank you. I didn't see all those late ones. Well, the way this whole concept started, I made a list of all the things that lobby team, that issue chairs do. We testify, we meet with legislators. Those were the only 2 things that we do typically, maybe testifying to an agency, that had to be done in Olympia. The vast majority of our work is done, we used to make a joke about working in your pajamas. Well, for some of us, that's more common these days, but you can do it at home. There's so much you can do: reading, writing, drafting, research, gathering information, calling other league members or calling legislators. So please do not think about traveling to Olympia as being an obstacle that's going to stop you. There's so much work. Frankly, I typically go to Olympia maybe 5-6 times a year during the legislative session to testify. I guess more than that, but anyway, so there's a lot you can do.
Toyoko has a hand up. We're going to take that and maybe one more question, and then we'll need to move on. So Toyoko, can you state your question briefly, please? Is she unmuted?
That question was for the lobbyist.
Oh,
so
okay.
it was kind of late. Yeah.
Okay, well, can you write it in the chat box and we'll get it
Yes.
handled?
I send it to Pam privately.
Okay, great, great.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. All right. So if your question does get answered, you can just click that little blue hand again and it'll take your hand down and then we won't wonder about that. One real quick question regarding incarceration reentry issues. That's Deb Karstens, and that's on your card and page that we'll get into in just a minute. Kathy?
Can I respond to one more about remote testimony? The House, excuse me, the Senate, some committees, and I think it's only 1 or 2 so far, in the Senate have been allowing remote testimony. Well, this pandemic, let's face it, it sucks. It's been a pain in the butt, but it's maybe taught us that we can communicate without being physically in person. There was a bill dropped right at the end of the session that that would have allowed for more use of technology to communicate with legislators. I'm going to be working with that, the sponsor of that bill, to look about modernizing the way the legislature works. And frankly, we don't have enough remote testimony going on right now, but that just means we have to change it. And that just means we need to lobby on it. And that just means we need more people lobbying. So if that's a passion of yours, I'd love to talk to you about that.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. We're going to go back to slides and move through some other information for you. And I know this will seem like you're zipping through the territory here. So, and up is coming our next slide. And we want to get into what the lobby team does. Remember, I told you 70 of their bills passed. Well, they worked on at least 225 bills in 16 different issue areas, which you can see on this card. Hopefully you all had a chance to have this card in your hand, and because I don't expect you to try and read it here. But one of the things we want to do is make sure that we, as Kathy was saying, try to get more people to assist our issue chairs and looking at getting more done on each of the areas that they are working on. And so if you want to know what they're working on, Marty's going to give you that little direction here in just a minute as to how to find everything on our league website. It's important as we're talking about these things to remember who speaks for the league. And those of you that were in yesterday's sessions were reminded that the president at each level of league is the official spokesperson for that league, that being the local, state, or national. The president can delegate that authority to specific people, and at the state level, that little chain goes down through the advocacy chair, the lobby team chair, and the issue chairs that are listed. I could turn that card over, they're all there, but we'll see them in just a minute. And so now we want to move on and look at some of the specifics of lobby team activities. And as we continue to go through these next slides, please put your questions in the chat box so we've got them for the ending. And we're going to start off with looking at how we decide to take what action we take. And Catherine All, our education issue chair, will address how the issue chairs determine the action that they will take in each session. And sometimes they have to also be aware of those initiative and referendum that are out there as forms of legislation that are outside of the session. So Catherine, take it away.
Okay, well, the lobby team meets weekly during the legislative session, and we discuss some of the bills there. Pros and cons, how many sponsors it has. Sometime Nancy and Pam can give us an idea of committee chairs and what their opinion is and how likely it is to pass. But mainly the question is, do we have a position covering this issue? And it can be state or national. We can use that position to decide then whether we're going to support or oppose a bill. If we don't have a position on that issue, we don't do either support or oppose. This maintains league's integrity and has gained much respect from legislators because they know we don't jump around and decide what to support or oppose based on emotion. We do it based on our positions. One of the most fun times I had in the legislature back in 2009 was the lobby team had a meeting and we said, you know, we've been complaining about civics not being in the classrooms anymore. So we decided, well, we'd write our bill. And we got a legislator to sponsor it and put it in correct language. We testified on it. It passed the House unanimously. It passed the Senate unanimously, and it was signed by the governor. That took effect. It said there must be a semester of civics as a requirement to graduate from high school. And so that took effect with the class of 2016. And so it's been going on, it's been there. It's not always followed, and that's part of our jobs is to find out about it. But anyway, that's another way that we can advocate. And many other issue chairs have been involved in writing bills too. So that's the basics.
And we might say then we got the standalone civics class then dealt with as well.
Yes. A couple of years ago, we made sure it was a standalone, not embedded in any other social studies class.
Okay, we had a couple of questions come in for Catherine. Let's just deal with them right now.
Okay.
Lobby team meets weekly. When? Zoom? Both. The team members that are in Olympia that day sit in a room, and the rest of us are on Zoom, and we'll have to see how that changed this year. But we meet at 11:30 on Thursdays during the session. 11:30, and Pam and Nancy are able to join the team as well. And then who helps to write the bills if League works on them? Catherine, can you talk about what kind of help you had writing the bill you worked on and how that works?
What I did was we basically put down that it should be federal, state, and local government initiative and referendum, so forth. Took it to the chair of the House Education Committee, who has a person, a legislative representative, that makes sure it's written in the right legislative language. So that's the help we got on that.
Okay, and then the other key part is always you have to find a legislator to sponsor the bill too,
Well,
and that person has input, right?
Yes, and then that was the chair of the House Education Committee, because we knew it was an issue with him, and he had a lot of clout over the Education Committee, so helped that way too.
And to quickly answer the question, the civic standalone bill was a new bill. It was not an amendment to the previous bill, right?
It sort of was, because the original bill didn't state that it had to be standalone. And so it became embedded in other classes. And so we had to have that next bill that said it will be a standalone class.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And now we're going to move to talking about coalition. Next to speak will be Cynthia Stewart, our issue chair for housing and homelessness, transportation, and revenue. Phew, you can tell Cynthia's busy during the session. She will address why and how we are involved in various coalitions and the importance of looking at legislation through the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. Cynthia?
So I'm going to not talk in a lot of detail. I would like people to know that you can check out what coalitions we belong to formally by going to the website, the State League. It's LWVWA.org/coalitions. Pretty easy to find. We join coalitions for a number of reasons, and mostly because it expands our capacity greatly. First, as volunteers, which our lobby team is, we can't necessarily keep up with all the issues in the same way that organizations who have paid staff can do. So the coalitions can help us by exchanging, helping to coordinate our lobbying work. Also, the issues we support are very broad-based, and most of the coalitions we join are more closely associated with single issue categories. So they may have more specialized knowledge in their fields, and we can benefit Thirdly, we can expand the League's DEI efforts by getting to know leaders from diverse communities and learning more about their particular challenges. This helps us in our voter registration and get out the vote work, as well as lobbying on overlapping issues. The coalitions that we join have to meet certain criteria. Specifically, they must be nonpartisan as we are, not support or oppose any candidates or any political parties, and they must have positions that are comparable to those of the League. Some examples, and I'm not going to give a lot of them, include the Washington Voting Justice Coalition, which includes communities of color, young people, people formerly convicted of a felony, and people with disabilities. The Transportation Choices Coalition, which includes not only transit and alternative mode transportation providers, but also people interested in service for seniors, disabled, and low-income people. The Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance, which is the one I work with the most, supports affordable housing options and services for people experiencing homelessness. The Healthcare Coalition advocates for change in our healthcare system to make it more accessible and affordable for all. And the Environmental Priorities Coalition advocates for policies that protect our environment and offset the progress of climate change. In other words, we try to stop it. So those are some limited examples of a long list of coalitions, and I just can't speak highly enough to the importance of the coalitions and the work that we do.
Hey, thank you, Cynthia. And I don't see any questions. Judy, did you get any questions on that?
No, we have no questions.
Okay, so now we're going to put our seatbelts on and we're going to move over to Marty, who is going to take us on a live demo trip through the website. So give us the time to make this transition. We're trying to see how many different elements we can use in this presentation. Marty, take us on a trip here.
I'm trying to find Marty. Here we go. Marty, can you unmute yourself? Marty, you're muted.
There we go. There we go. There, finally. I'm Marty Gibbons. I serve the lobby team as the Climate and Water Issues Chair. The lobby team maintains online resources to quickly update on important legislation and easily communicate with your legislators when we need their votes on priority legislation. And you have 3 ways to find this information. They're emailed to you every week during the legislative session in the legislative newsletters. Those newsletters are also available in a newsletter archive, and you can get the same information from the advocacy webpage. But where I'm going to start today is with the legislative newsletter archive, and you can find that in the upper right-hand corner of the home page of the Washington State League. So going to that link, if you don't already subscribe to the legislative newsletter, you can subscribe here or go to the archive here. And for this, the purpose of this demo, I will access the February 23rd newsletter from last year. At the top, there are some a link to some helpful hints if you forget what's in there. There's also some information on what's going on in the legislature that week. And then next are the action alerts, which we've talked about a bit. And we are gratified that 60% of you, according to the poll, respond to our action alerts. That's great. But as a review, an action alert has some paragraphs on why this is important. It also has a link to the legislative information and a link where you can go to invoke an email to your legislator. I'll first go to the legislative web information. This is hosted by the legislature. So it is a summary of the bill number and who are the sponsors, and also a quick look status that shows where the bill is in the legislative process. Further down this page is a history of how it moved through the process, mostly committee hearings and how the committee members voted, also how the full chamber voted. Further down are summaries of the bill content, including the original bill in its original language and summaries of that language, more in a perhaps more friendly version. Further down, they list the amendments to the bills as it went through the process. Near the bottom of the page, videos of all the committee hearings are stored, and you can review those committee meetings, those committee hearings, and hear the testimony given in them. And this is all hosted on TVW. They do a great job of documenting all the activity in the committees and have additional information as well. Then backing up back to the legislative newsletter, we encourage you to email your legislators. In this case, this once in a lifetime or once in a decade opportunity, Senate Substitute House Bill 2575. Selecting this link goes to additional information on that issue, why you should support it, further down, once you enter your zip code and add your street address, it will find your district and identify your legislators. In this case, the bill was on the Senate floor, so it just selects the senators. Mark Mullet is my senator. In my case, the information populates automatically, but you'll also enter your email address and then you can use the text that is already drafted by the issue chair, which is a good summary of why they should vote for the bill, or in some cases, why they should oppose the bill. Nevertheless, we encourage you to personalize this message, because a very powerful message to the legislator is a personal story about how this bill might have affected you or will affect you. But you can also send it as is. I think finally, it's important to know that the letter, the letter is from you, not from the league. And the legislators really want to hear from their constituents more than organizations. So that's why we make it this way. Back to the legislative newsletter. Further down are all the issues represented. And these have links to the web page for each issue. For instance, on elections, Kathy summarizes the bills. In this case, this is the end of session. So she went through a summary of what was signed into law and what did not pass. And once again, with these links, you can find the detailed information from the legislative website. Now, the additional way to find the legislative information is from the homepage, the advocacy pull-down menu. You can go to current issues, and once again, find that issue card that Ann showed earlier, where all these links go to one of the issue pages summarizing the bills. And from here, you can select issues important to you and learn how the bills are moving through the session. Finally, under advocacy again, you can find much more detail on the league positions, how we evaluate the bills, the coalitions, action workshops, And you can even see the profiles of all the issue chairs. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ann.
Hey, thank you, Marty. And so we will, we're going to go into now how you all can fit into being more involved. And so we, at this point, I can tell we're going to go a little bit past our 5 o'clock end time for this segment. So hopefully that will be okay. We have answered some of our questions as we have gone along. So Kathy, I'm tossing it to you to talk about a little bit more about volunteering to be part of an issue team.
Terrific. Thank you, Ann. And thank you, Martin. I mean, Martin demonstrated there's a lot of information available on our website. Guess who writes all that information and researches it? Well, it's the issue chairs and other people on their team. And speaking of which, I need to do a shout out for Cindy Madigan, because she is very interested in democracy issues and has helped me update my issue page. So that's one chunk of the work that we do. The truth is, there is an endless number of things that the League could be doing to strengthen our advocacy. We could be putting up press releases. I'd love to have a letter to the editor every week in every paper about certain bills, but I don't write those. I just simply do not have time. And that's why I think it is so just valuable for you to look at how you can get involved and how you can make a contribution without being an expert, without having to travel to Olympia, without having to be a technical genius. As we said earlier, there's a lot you can do. So in the handout on the second page, there was a list of, I want to stress the word potential volunteer roles. And I don't think it's a complete list. There might be other things that you might be interested in doing that would help move the League advocacy on any area where we're working. You would do that under the supervision of an issue chair, or if it's something more broad, maybe working with Ann. But the truth is, there's just many things that we'd like to do that we just don't have time to. And it's not, I tell people, it's not that I want you to make my job easier. I just want you to, again, leverage the League's voice in democracy by taking on new areas, working in new areas. And if it's something I'm doing now, but you want to take it over, that's terrific. So we're trying to organize our volunteers so that people can do one specific thing. Write social media. Doesn't take a lot of time. Or even if you're posting something on your page, send a link to it to the issue chair involved, and we may want to put that on the League page. So it doesn't really add, we talked about, I know time is tight, but there's a lot that you can do. We also heard, of course, about the issue of expertise, and I could take a whole hour. I won't, Ann.
Thank you.
Yes, I know, but Kirsten Mueller, some of you have met her. If you've been at Democracy Lobby Day, you've heard her speak. In 2 years, she went from a young woman watching the 2016 election returns and hearing comments about Russian hacking. About 6 months later, she contacted me. I frankly, stupidly didn't respond to her right away because I was so busy. Within 2 years, she was recognized as a national expert on election security. She taught herself all of that. A few years later, and if you were at this year's Democracy Lobby Day, you may have seen that she was back in the back of the room talking with the Secretary of State's staff, because the Secretary of State had directed her staff not to drop a bill until they talked to Kirsten. And there were some things in the bill that Kirsten didn't like, and we said the League will not endorse this bill unless we have a written guarantee that you will make these changes, you will amend the bill to say this. And while the Secretary of State was walking up to the front of to speak to the group, her staff was negotiating with Kirsten so that at the end of the presentation, the Secretary of State, we could say, yes, the League will endorse this bill. So you don't have to be an expert to turn out making a huge impact. The other thing I have to address, and Cynthia talked about the work we do with in the area of DEI. I will tell you, everyone on the lobby team, every issue chair, has a very strong commitment to racial justice and to racial equity in our society. But none of us have a very perfectly fine-tuned, always on racial justice lens. We try to look at things that way, and I don't know, Cynthia, I might be wrong. You may have done that, but we try and look at things through the racial justice lens. But I have to be honest, we need more people who are really passionate about that issue and knowledgeable about that issue, who might see a line in a bill and realize it has a racial impact. I can, maybe if we have time later on, I'll give you an example of one. Some of the things we're working on now in the democracy area is extending voting rights for non-native English speakers, and that's allowing us to work with communities of color, and also exploring ballot rejection rates. That is when somebody sends in their ballot, but for some reason it doesn't get counted. It's not surprising that at least nationwide, that happens disproportionately to communities of color. So we're working with the state auditor to look at where is that happening, who is it happening to, and that's something that it will involve a lot of research and a lot of reaching out to various communities, and then we're going to take advantage of that information and say, now what can the league do about this? What kind of training can the league do on? So Anne mentioned early on, you know, start your to-do list. I hope you have one, but I'm going to ask you to take a look at the handout, and there's all areas under these 4 areas on the slide in front of you, and think about what could you do with that 10 minutes a week, or 15 minutes a week during session, or an hour a week during session. So, and don't be limited to what's on there. Those are just examples of things that you can do. There's one more thing, a very special volunteer job that we're encouraging people to step up to, and I'll hand this back to Cynthia Stewart, who will talk about a special role of a local league liaison.
Thank you. Some of the leagues have a local league liaison and many do not, and we would encourage as many leagues as possible to have somebody in this role. This is somebody who can be connected with the lobby team, and an example is in Thurston County, there's a woman named Paula Holroyd who has been attending the lobby team meetings, and then what she does is she takes issues back to her members, and they do a marvelous sending letters and making phone calls in support of what the lobby team needs. And one of the values of that is that when legislators hear from their own constituents, they have a different, it puts a different emphasis on what we're trying to do than when we talk to them. So if somebody in Spokane contacts the Spokane legislators, they are going to pay more attention to that than to me coming from Olympia and talking to them. One of the other things that can do is if we have an organization at some degree in a local league, is we from the members about what their legislators said, and that will help us tremendously in terms of our own strategizing and the approach that we take with our legislation. So finally, if there are members of, who have specific expertise, that can actually help us a lot too. Just connecting with somebody locally that can add value at the local legislative level. So we appreciate having a local league liaison whenever we can get somebody to do that function.
Okay, and I might add one of your handouts has that list of items that a local league liaison can do, and the way to connect to get involved in that. So just briefly looking at more things that you can do. Many of you have done this. Important events that the league has had for years are both our action workshops, greatly expanded from originally there was one action workshop per season, and it was usually in Bellevue, is my understanding. And then we did wind up getting people to come to workshops on the really true east side over here in Eastern Washington. And in the last few years, we have held multiple workshops in multiple venues with the help of local leads. And then our lobby day of yore, we used to have one that was just strictly coming to Olympia, but now we have focused it on Democracy Lobby Day that we co-sponsor with Fix Democracy First. Shout out to Cindy Black. I see you're on the call, so thank you, Cindy. So please know that we are planning for these activities for this fall. We just don't know how they're going to play out yet. I know that we have learned through this council that this can be a great way to do this, but know that we will get something set up so that we will still have some form of action workshop and figure out the steps for next February for that lobby day in Olympia, if we can do that. So thank you for spending this hour with us to learn more about league advocacy and to move into this next year of action with renewed resolve to be involved even more. So I've mentioned the handouts that you find in the links in the box for this session, as well as the PowerPoint. There are important, one that's an important link because we probably breezed through a whole lot of stuff. So take a look at the links that are there to get you back to some of this information. And now take a look at that to-do list that you've been creating. Circle something that sounds appealing or that you want to know more about, and then make a commitment to follow up. We will also connect with you, and we are ready to help you go to the next step in your league advocacy. And soon, Amy and I were just talking about this, when this will come out to you, an actual email survey to connect with us into what you're interested in, what topics you're interested in, what volunteer tasks that Kathy described that you're interested in. And this will be one of those things that can't be anonymous. In order to connect with you, we're going to need your name and contact information. So, please respond to that. And now we're ready to go to Q&A, and we've had some come in on the chat box. So Judy, I've got some, and let's back up and take some of these. And Judy, have you got more that came just to you?
No, they're all to everyone right now.
Okay, great. I want to let you know that if you have questions regarding some of the particular bills that were passed or the areas that we work on, we of course have on the call Kathy on the democracy team, Marty and Phyllis Farrell are on the call, and those two can answer questions related to climate change and some of the other water and energy issues that may have come up. Catherine, of course, could answer anything on the education bill. Deb Carstens is on the call, and she is our criminal justice person. Kim Abbey is on the call and handles that huge area of healthcare, behavioral health, and reproductive rights. So going into one of the questions that came in early on was, and it's a question that we all spend a lot of time talking about, and that's the number of issues. Do we have too many issues? Why don't we just work on democracy issues? And believe me, we have talked about it. And and just, I think the main answer, the thing that I really like finding out about, of course, we are a multi-issue organization, have been from the beginning, that they've all been important issues. And one of the things that we keep learning, and our lobbyists have told us this as well, is that when League is talking about other than the democracy issues, well, when they are talking about that too, but League brings a different perspective to some of those other issues. We bring a set of values, and of course, those of you that heard Judy Davis talk last night know that bringing that that safe space of nonpartisanship to dealing with these issues is very important as well. So are there any team members who want to briefly add anything to that? Catherine.
Well, I guess I would say, I don't think we could have democracy without education. So, and our democracy, a good democracy, also depends on protecting our environment and taking care of homeless. So I think these things all fit together. It's part of the country we hope we can someday have.
It weaves a web of activity that we're all working on, and hence why it would be nice to have more people involved to help work on those. Okay,
And
so
can I follow up?
yes, Kathy.
So as a democracy team chair, I will tell you that there were times that I've sort of felt that way, but I have, I have learned that, and one thing you may have heard me say, people are most effective when they follow their passion. So if someone's passion is climate change or education or gun safety or homelessness, telling them, oh, you can't work on that anymore, you have to work on democracy, it's just not going to work. They won't be as effective as they are following their passion. And so I'm just thrilled to work with such a diverse team with so much diverse expertise. And I often hear from legislators that part of the reason that our reputation is what it is and that the league is valued so much is because of the breadth of our issues.
Okay, let's see. Kathy is suggesting you can also help with Democracy Lobby Day. That is something that needs more all hands on deck because it is a little bit more of a complicated event to put together. Have a question on, does a coalition group have to be located in Washington? Well, I would say probably yes, because we're working on Washington legislation. And so I don't think we've even asked that question before. Anyone on the team want to add more to that?
Some of the coalitions we work with national groups.
Right.
Like the Washington Voting Justice works with the Brennan Center or, other national democracy groups. But the work is really local because we're focused on, as you said, state issues.
And then there was another question back up here. And Cynthia, maybe this is going to be a good one for you to answer. What have you heard about state bank in the whole revenue money arena?
I know that Senator Kaiser has been working on that issue for about 3 or 4 years now. And I don't know, I haven't been following the issue. I've been only looking at revenue, actually taxation, basically. But I can possibly try to get some more information. I think there was a state bank proposal several years ago, and it didn't go anywhere. Kathy, it looks like you want to add something.
There actually was a task force set up this year that ended up getting vetoed because of the expense. And I'm wondering if Beth Pellicciati, I think, has heard a few speeches on the state bank. I guess I can't say why, but anyway, so she knows someone who's very interested in that issue and may be able to have an impact on it. So it is definitely something that is being seriously considered.
Well, and we also know that Toyoko's been involved in that, as has Adele Reynolds, and they're both on the call in terms of the task force that the state league set up to follow this issue. And so we just need to get all the right people together. I'm going to try and get rid of, there are a lot of you wanting to have a happy hour tomorrow night, but I'm going to ask someone else to organize.
I'll host it.
It sounds like fun. And let's see, there was something else in here. I've got to get back to it because I saw Oh, do you feel COVID-19 could shift your focus to some issues during this next year? Well, most definitely. I mean, that's a new lens we have to start looking at. And so that'll be part of, now that we're getting over this hump of the council presentations here, we will be then meeting to start looking at where we're going next year. Okay, I saw.
Toyoko has raised her hand.
Okay, Toyoko, go ahead while I find this other question I need to do. Okay, go
Yes.
ahead.
So I'm leading League Public Bank Task Force, and we are ready to make a recommendation to the state board in early July to our decision to whether recommend or not recommend the public bank, either support public bank by the state league. So that recommendation will be ready to
Okay.
put it on. I just
Thank
wanted to let everybody know.
Right, thank you, Toyoko. And,
You're welcome.
okay, I'm trying to get back to this question I saw. It was, well, Sylvia, I can't find it now. There it is. Can you speak to the sex ed bill and referendum 90? Catherine and I have been working on this. As you may be aware, Catherine in her education advocacy this year supported the passage of the sex ed bill, and then of course the opponents of that bill filed referendum 90, and they're in the final throes of gathering their signatures to put that on the ballot in November. So the stance of the state league did approve not supporting the referendum and actually trying to do some informal decline to sign messages, because if it does make the ballot, this is where it's interesting in our big civics lesson, is that we need to vote to approve referendum 90 if it gets on ballot because of the way it's worded. It's worded, do you approve of retaining whatever the bill number is? I can't remember, Catherine. So what more do you want to say on that, Catherine?
No, I'm just waiting for June 10th to see if they've gotten all of the signatures they need. And then again, our work will begin. We have to educate folks about how a referendum is on the ballot and how it's worded. And we want to keep support for the comprehensive sexual health education bill.
So we didn't want to go out with a big message saying, don't do referendum 90 because if they do get it on the ballot, then we have to say vote for it, and so it appears consistent. So we're kind of just being as subtle about it and crossing our fingers that they don't get the signatures. I would say one of the questions here is how are they collecting signatures? Well, on petitions, I mean, they were allowed to be able to send in to collect them. It wasn't an electronic signature, but they could. Kathy, do you remember? I can't remember.
No. They had to physically mail petitions to the campaign. They could not do it electronically.
Right, and because it couldn't, they could be a different size petition. I think they were being allowed to use a smaller format or something. Am I remembering that correctly? Yeah. So, so I don't know. They're gathering, and I saw, well, I don't know. We spend time noodling in their websites as well. And with information, there'll be, drive-by sites where you can come in and sign the petition. I saw that on there. So I saw that as a collection. So that, and what's the number? It was 250,000 signatures, Catherine?
quite that many.
or just,
Although that would be the margin we would want to get that many in order to make sure you had enough legitimate
Right.
signatures. But it's fewer than that to actually get it on the ballot.
right. So we haven't heard anything so they're keeping it close to the vest at this point. When will we know if R90 has enough signatures? Well, they have to deliver them on June 10th, which is Wednesday. And so if they deliver them, they'll think they have enough. And if they don't, then they won't get delivered. So, but it all depends how close they are to the actual number they need. And then the verification process will have to be completed. And I'm not sure how long that takes. Okay. Anything else? Let's see. This question that, oh, Jeannie's saying, I'm just tired, but yes, there is a lot of work out there. And you heard, those of you that attended our session yesterday afternoon heard that there'll still be some work to do. The ERA apparently has some life left because I don't know. Well, it was interesting hearing Jessica Jones Caparel disagree with the statement that the Ruth Gator Ginsburg made. So, that the time has long, the original timeline has long since lapsed, but they're going to be working on it. Okay. Any other questions? Type them in, raise your hand.
And there was one a long ways back, and the question was, is there a service like govtrack.us that tracks how state legislators are voting on particular bills? If not, is there a time-saving way to track how your legislators vote? Alerts, search tools?
And somebody, I think I saw, typed in a sort of response.
I think that was responding to a different question.
Okay.
This one is specific legislators.
I don't know.
So what someone typed in is, on any given bill, you can go to that page and see what the vote was. I don't know of anything, although frankly, there are so many new services. The interest in democracy reform, boy, it's not just the league. It's going on all over the country. There may be a new website out there today that is doing that even at the state level. I know there's some doing it federally. So I wouldn't say no to that, but I think it would take some research. So who wants to do research?
Kathy,
Yes?
This is Marty. I think Ballotpedia may have some information like that too. And the leg.wa.gov also implies that the two-party caucuses have that information for each individual. I was just rooting around. I couldn't find it right away, but I think I've seen it in the past.
I
And
haven't seen it on the Ledge website, and if the caucuses have it, it may not be public, but
well, okay.
Yeah, let's not give up on that. I think you're right. I think there's a chance. Marty's a good researcher.
So something else to do to help make us more informed. Amy Davis says she's used Vote Smart to find that information. Amy. Phyllis Farrell has her hand up. So go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I was just going to add, some coalitions track the bills that are their priority bills, and with legislator records, vote records. For example, Washington Conservation Voters tracks about 11 bills, priority bills, and they give a percentage rating on all of the legislators.
Right, and there are a number of publications that will then give those legislator report cards. That's not something that the league does, but you find that in other places. So we have come to the end of our time together, and certainly appreciate all of you being here to learn more about state action, and certainly hope that we will have you involved when we figure out what we're doing for this next legislative year, because as you heard Nancy and Pam say, the legislators need to figure it out as well. So we'll all be moving in this new world together. So thank you all, and we'll see you back the next session with Joan Lawson. We'll be talking about local league action.